Why is a planet's influence more powerful in the cardinal points of the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses?
Well, if we're saying that this is what the tradition states, right, then they're talking about what has been observed and found to be the case. Okay? And that's what we're talking about, what has been the case. And so these are the houses that have been the case. Let me have a second here to take a closer look at this. Yeah, the cardinal points are the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses, right? And they correspond to Aries, 1st house, Cancer, the 4th house, right? The natural 4th house, and Libra, the 7th house. And the 10th house is Capricorn. So those signs, right, wherever they are, have that influence. And everybody's born with a different rising sign. So, you know, in some cases, if we're saying that we're talking about the cardinal signs, then you could be born, let's say in the month of Aries, you can be born at 6 a.m. and your rising sign will be about Aries. So you begin with Aries there. If you're born later, then it changes that day by every hour, so-called hour and a half, whatever it is, so many minutes. You're going into another sign that very day. Everything else is the same, but the time, see, and that means you're positioning your planets differently. So you're going through different configurations. And so that's something worth getting into, so you can see what your particular pattern is and why you, as an individual, picked a cardinal sign to be in or a fixed sign to be in as a rising sign. And so, you know, there's no, let's say, no set law about it. You have to determine what the forces mean to you as an individual. We can say because you have an Aquarius rising, you know, you have a certain type, and you have Leo on the 7th house, and there's a certain type of relationships that you can say is useful to you in a certain way. But because you have Aquarius and Leo on the ascendant and descendant, you're probably going to have Taurus at the base and Scorpio at the midheaven. See, that's the general cross at the cardinal points. Okay, now people don't have to have a particular sign there, but if they have planets in those areas, then it's the same. So it's really not so much the signs, but the planets in the houses. That's why it's important to have your time, because that's where the power comes from, knowing what planets in what areas. I mean, people can know that anyway. But when they're living a certain life, let's say a public figure is living a certain life, has no knowledge whatsoever to base their particular success on, right, in terms of astrologic basis for it. But they say, no, I'm a total professional, and I have forces here, and I'm into making money, and you know, I love public service. And you get the chart set up, and you see that their 10th house is pregnant with forces. So well, there's no way they couldn't be in public service. See? And they'll be known without them wanting to be known. They're going to be known because they have planets in that area of the highest visibility and most, let's say, noticeable or recognized public service. See, they become like authorities in a way. So, oh, you got to know this person, and not know their charts, but you know that's the person of authority you want to refer to. So, well, often you see the coincidences there. I'm not saying that's 100%, but that's pretty natural. See? And a person that's always home, doesn't want to go anywhere else, in a manner of speaking, can have very strong 4th house karma, and they work from out of their home. Their home is their business, it's everything, the universe, 4th house karma. Traditionally, spot on, as they say. Okay. Then you have a person that's a loner, right? 1st house type, and they don't care, you know, what else there is to know about anything but themselves. 1st house type, 1st house stellium, it's obvious. They don't have to know about it. You see it in their person, right? They need to be heard. They need to be stating what they have to state. And then you have the opposite of that in some cases, where you have a 7th house personality. So you have the 1st house personality is always self-centered. And necessarily so. I'm not saying that is a problem, or egoic, anything. It's just the forces are with them. They have to manifest these forces. This is what it means to have all these planets there. They are manifesting through you. And then in the 7th house, let's say partnerships and relations, and you see that these people are completely relationally obsessed. It's not about them at all, it's about what they can do for other peeps. So you have these configurations that speak for themselves. Once you see it, and you see the patterns, that highly intelligent people were very involved in this, but it's not a popular thing, so you keep it pretty much to yourself, but it's obvious. And I've been in organizations where they say that nobody believed in it, but until you became knowledgeable of them and in privacy, you see, everybody was into astrology. Everybody. And seriously, it was funny. Oh, we don't believe in that out in the public, but really practicing it privately because it's validation of what their experience is.
Since there are many people that that I know of anyways, that are seem to have a focus or concerns regarding relationships, do you have any advice or insight to offer regarding the 7th house?
Again, it's not who you are, but what you're likely to deal with. The emphases there are really given to the individual if you have precise birth time. See? So you can help you can help yourself to master that. Rather than be obsessive relative to peeps, you might, once you know that you have a certain, let's say, obsession with peeps, you might want to, because of that, spend a little bit more time cultivating what is best for you. See? Because then the forces, as indicated, are using you for no good reason until you make it a good reason and you make it a good purpose for yourself. That means you take advantage of it. I said at the opening of this is something you need to control as an individual. See, that means balance. See what it is that is taking you out and keeping you held down occupationally or whatever it is, materially, and see what you can do to counter that once it is validated or verified by other means, occult or whatever. So you see, yeah, no, this is what your experience is, and you need to balance that. You need to be more true to you as a balanced human being, see? As an individual. See? And that's what we're here on Earth to do, is to work from a good individual center to be in a positive service to other peeps. See? So we're not ourselves their burden, and they are not themselves our burden. See? It's balanced.
What kind of a role does the descendant sign play in the 7th house? Is it considered a negative influence?
It could be, but it could also not be, you see. We have to turn whatever would be a negative into a positive because we have intelligence and creativity to be able to do that. So it depends. It really depends. If you have what are called the negative planets in there, and it just brings darkness to you, like let's say, for instance, hypothetically, Pluto, Saturn, Uranus, which could be considered, or Mars, in the house of marriage, that doesn't make for great harmony. But if you're a lawyer and a business person, that could be perfect for you. See? And you say, no, well, that's what it takes. We're making money, but we have to deal with the public. See, and it gets complicated, but we keep our distance. See, we have a line here. It's a business barrier that protects you, and all the business is handled properly. See, and you're not in any way getting caught up in the peeps. It's just business contract. See, it's just business. It's all good for business. You keep your space. You give them their space. They come for the product and the service, and that's it, end of story. See? Professional.
Does the 7th house sun work counter to one's individual or self-purpose?
Say again?
Does the 7th house sun work counter to one's individual or self-purpose?
It could. You see, it could. You see, you have to have intelligence to use this. If you don't, then you're caught up in this kind of forest or jungle of strange relations and strange connections. So if we're talking about something in the 7th house, that could be seen as service. See? service, a connection worth having, see, because it's a two-way service. Then you could be able to help the individual, or individuals, see. That could key you into individuals. That could be a useful thing. A lot of musicians have strong seventh houses, see, because they want to work with people, they want to hobnob with people, they want to associate, because if you're into music, you have to. See? And so their inclinations are to be with people and play for people, and it's all about the people, and that's part of their mission, so there's nothing wrong with that. See, now when it becomes overwhelming to the individual, then it's time for them to take a look at it, step back a little bit, and if they can have insight into why they're drowning in relations, and relations which are, let's say, not necessarily altogether positive for them, then they're letting a karma of association maybe get them in too deep, and they need to have some objectivity relative to their subjective need, let's say, seventh house need, to associate, right? And bond with people, see, or be dragged down to other people's karma in the process. So it's good to know, but it's good to repair it at the same time.
How significant of a role do degrees play in a chart? Does every degree in every sign have specific meaning?
In my work it has. I wrote a book on the 360 degrees back in the day when I finally first got into it, I think, in the early 80s. And so from that viewpoint, yes, you can make sure that every degree has a certain kind of significance. And so I have to finish that book. But I did do it's called the 360 degrees of understanding. So yes, every day has relevance. Every moment has relevance. It really depends on to what degree the individual is going to be bringing that kind of significance and meaning to their life. See? And I'm not saying it's the same for everybody, but you have to make your days and your nights meaningful to you, purposeful, see? And not just be asleep, to your life as it's going by because it's more the same, more the same, more the same. No, it's more the same because you have the more the same mind, but it's not more the same if your mind is such where you want meaning now. You want this to be a meaningful, let's say, moment in your life, and then of course you have to create that for yourself, make sure it's meaningful to you.
You refer to the planets as being in a subjective or objective sphere. Would you be able to explain this in more detail, and how much of an influence may this play in one's chart?
Well, it does play a very powerful influence in one's chart when we're talking about the wheel itself, right? 12th house system, right? You have 6 houses, or 6 windows beneath the horizon, and you have 6 above. And then you have 6 on the other side, right, and 6 on this side. Okay. And so when we're talking about this breakdown into quadrants, then the lower quadrant, the nadir, is obviously, and historically, scientifically, that is, you can prove it to yourself, that area of introversion. The opposite, the midheaven, is for extroversion. You have let's say, the eastern horizon, let's say to the left, right? You have the individual, right? Self, emergence, and its opposite is other emergence. See? And so you have these quadrants that if you have a stellium of planets there, then your nature is pretty much defined and determined. But you can have, let's say, several planets in one area, and so you have that, say, type or introversion or need to be private and sort of to yourself, right? But you can have planets elsewhere, so it's relative then. See? But if you have too many planets in an area, then it's pretty much a sealed deal. That's going to be your nature, and everybody's going to know it. Whether it's 6 or 7 planets in one area or other, everybody's going to know it, especially the individual.
Is there a danger for those who study astrology to get locked into one particular viewpoint? If so, is this common in the astrological community?
Well, people make it a religion, basically, because it's so, let's say, for them, it is so valid. People don't budge until they feel there is an auspicious indication for them to do that. They leave everything up to the planets. I don't recommend that at all. I think you have to defy the planets, in a sense. You have to defy the gods and so on. You have to create your own momentum, with all due respect to, let's say, the solar system and what it means to ancient cultures who used it in a very sacred manner. We have to use it and not be used by it. You have to use religion, not be controlled by it. You have to use politics, but not be controlled by it. So you have to use the military, but not be controlled by it, particularly. Right? You have to use marriage, but not be a slave to it at the same time. If it's a workable proposition for people, fine. But if it becomes a certain field of intimidation and disempowerment and degradation, humiliation, and it's useless. And you have to break away from it. You're not going to wait till somebody else frees you from it. You have to know enough to free yourself.
If there's no planets in a particular house, but there is a sign in that house, would that sign's ruling planet be an influence in that house?
Definitely. Good question.
How strong of an influence would it be?
Depends on the rest of the chart. It all depends on the whole thing. It doesn't depend on any one point. So it's not enough to say, well, the person is a Gemini or a Sagittarius. That doesn't say anything. It's like, so what? You got to see the whole the whole portrait to get a better sense of it. So you have a better sense of how they're functioning as an individual. The sun is not enough, so you know where the will is. That's not enough. The moon is not enough. You know where the past is, and you know what the tendencies are. You know what the psychic nature is. But that's not enough. That's a part of the being, but not all of there is. Mars is not enough. Mercury's not enough. See, so the whole thing gives you a better general sense of the intelligence and the consciousness and the force and nature of the being, the spirit of the being. See. It's not in the parts. So we're talking about the whole, the sum. See, what's the sum of the influences? We get a better sense of who's who and what's what, and what to expect from them, and know what they can do. Say, not just pick, oh, when you have Mercury in this area, yeah, that's, I know, you know. No, because it's no isolated parts. It's all related to it. This is a system. See, so we know how the solar system is. It's changing all the time, but it's a perfect system. Nobody's falling off or out of orbit. Everything is like moving in perfect synchronicity as such. And that's the same with us. We are part of that. So the perfection is there. It's relative to your time of birth and what the aspects may be, or what the indications are, what the karmas are. And you have to prove that and know that for yourself. Go ahead.
What if there's a planet and sign ruled by that same particular planet in a house? Would the influence be even more magnified?
It could be, but there could be another planet in the mix that's disabling that planet. So it really takes a different kind of analysis, see? And it takes a synthetic, it's like a synthesis of understanding all these values. The exaltations of the signs, and or the exaltations of the planets, and what their faults are, weaknesses are, what their strengths are. All of this has to be weighed when you look at a chart. You have to weigh all that intuitively and be clear about it. And that's what makes a very successful reader. And it can be done. So it is a very useful system for certain individuals, but not for others.
Is the influence of a planet magnified when it's in its own house?
Say again?
Is the influence of a planet
magnified.
magnified when it's in its own house?
Yes, to a certain degree. That can be said. Mm-hmm. And if it's in its own sign, of course, it's going to be strong in its own sign, relatively speaking. But it could also be strong in its opposite sign, depending on what's going on. See? And opposition is going to strengthen planetary relations. See? It's going to strengthen it. See? It's going to strengthen. Conjunction is going to strengthen. These particular aspects are strengthening, in a sense. So you have squares are going to strengthen. See? They're considered negative because they're stressful, but without stress you don't get anything done. So we need stress. So we have to welcome all the stresses and say, well, stress is going to make us more aware of what we can do and what we can't do. So stress is good. Self-knowledge. Not bad.